Well, welcome to what I obviously think is the most exciting panel of the day. There's a reason for that. It's been exactly 1 year at this conference that we first, upon invitation, kind invitation of Qwist, had a conversation about the FiDA and the potential impact it might have. 12 months on, and today we are now finally certain that the Commission has FiDA on its agenda for the next few months. It's been a bit of a ride over the last 48 hours, and we're going to talk about that, but really we're going to talk about what actually the implementation of FiDA will mean, and how we're going to make it into an opportunity. And so without further ado, I'd love to introduce you to this fantastic panel. So we've got Szabolcs, who it was instrumental in getting FiDA through the Commission as part of the European, the Hungarian presidency. He was the former chair of the FiDA working group during that presidency. And so, Szabolcs, very much look forward to getting sort of the live feed from what's happened in Brussels over the last couple of days or more. We have Verena, who's Verena Ritter-Döring. She's a partner at Taylor Wessing and a specialist in regulatory law, and works in particular with both the fintech side as well as the banking side on regulated business models, bank licenses, and others. We have Norbert Broeckmann, who is responsible as part of strategy and development for the DZ Bank group, and has been very much emailing with the C-level at the bank about what's going on at the moment with FiDA. We have Alex. Alex works with clients mainly in the wealth management sector for a Swiss headquartered company called Additiv. He's responsible for the German market, and he can share with us what companies in the wealth sector are doing today with regards to data and APIs, and also how the Swiss market is treating something that they call open wealth. And then finally, but certainly not lastly, we have Schmitz. I think everyone knows Chris. He has been one of the biggest advocates for open finance and FiDA over the last year and a half, and really has been pushing the drums and really been instrumental in getting people to not only see FiDA as an obligation, but also as an opportunity for future growth. Now, what I said on stage is really true. I think everyone can talk about AI and agentic AI without structured, regulated, and consent-based data in the finance sector. That's going to have a hard time surviving. So super relevant. It's relevant for revenue, it's relevant for cost savings, and let's kick this off. Szabolcs, you have come in fresh from Brussels. Before we talk about the reasons why you got engaged with FiDA and believe that why it is an opportunity, what happened over the last 48 hours? Can you fill us in? My LinkedIn exploded.
Mine exploded too. It would be great to know what happened in the last 48 hours. But I think there is this ongoing debate around simplification and burden reduction, which is very important flagship initiative of the new Commission, and this is true for the financial services industry as well, and the financial services regulation. And as I see, sometimes FiDA is seen as a burden for the financial industry without necessarily identifying the potential what open finance and financial information data sharing has as well. So I think there is this debate, and the fact that we have FiDA in the work program of the Commission for 2025, and the trilogues are about to start on this file is a good sign, because we can continue the work towards creating a well-functioning framework on open finance.
And then how far is this seen as just one part and one data pool of the overall open data strategy?
If you have seen the Draghi report, the Draghi report also talks about data strategy and how to unlock the potential of data. We are living in a world where data shall be perceived as a new gold, we should use it. And the question is, how can you use it? And what is the most efficient way to do that?
And lastly, before we move on for now, what is your view on, and has been the EU's view on the attractiveness of creating FiDA? What was the purpose of doing it, and where did that element of value creation come from?
I think we shall not forget that the FiDA is consumer-oriented legislation. So the customers and the consumers are in the driving seat and can decide how to use their data, how their data shall be shared among financial industry stakeholders and participants. So this is the core element, and this is about data, this is about innovation, how to foster innovation and how to close the innovation gap which we see and which is identified compared to the US counterparts. And this is the main question, how to close this innovation gap and how we can use data to do that, and data sharing to unlock the potential of data.
Brilliant. Alex, your company has been a catalyst for transformation and digitalization in the financial industry for many years. What do you see as some of the key success factors, and then how far does partnerships and ecosystem building, which we're now seeing more and more for open finance, play a part in that?
I think it's very crucial what we've seen in recent times with our clients is only those are successful who have the mindset to really break the silos which they have internally, to be open-minded, to look around what can they do, what can they produce best internally, but also where are partners and which are the best partners fitting their strategy to address the customer needs, and which partners fit also to scale and to provide seamless customer journeys. So I think this all now comes together, especially with FiDA. It would be super important to be prepared for the use cases which will be possible, to choose the right partners, and taking up the message which we heard maybe in the main stage. It's really time to act. So we see that of course a lot of strategies and use cases have now been prepared, but get started early to get already the client experience and to get the know-how about the client expectations to then provide the right services with your right partners.
Amazing. Verena, in order to make FiDA work, in order to create traffic on those APIs, which has been sort of the criticism we've heard in open banking quite a lot, banks or data holders also need to become data users. And I assume that everyone in this room understands the different roles in open finance. And then they need to create reasons for customers to share their data. These things need to be evaluated from a regulatory point of view. And as someone who's run an open banking company, it's always the question, is this a regulated use case or not? How do you go and how do you advise people on this? And what's your view on the use cases that are coming out?
I think it's really a lot of potential. I think for the data holders who are complaining a lot, I think they should change the mindset, as Alex said, and really see the opportunity here also to become a data user. Because I think if you're only a data holder and you have to provide the data and then get incentivized, okay, but that's not really a growth case. I think you really need to think about how to change your business to either become a data user yourself, or you create a new company under your roof that can become a regulated data user, or you cooperate, you are looking for cooperation partners who you can work closely with. I think it's really lots of potential, and you have to think beyond your business right now to grow it further.
Okay. Chris, further to that, you speak obviously with pretty much everyone out there about the potential cost and lost opportunity of only treating this as a compliance requirement. What do you think are the really key use cases that can come out of open finance and that can contribute value?
I think you need to differentiate by client group. So I think Szabolcs already mentioned the consumer is probably the first addressee of this regulation. I think of stuff like the financial home, which basically is something that consumers can actually need, help them educate on financial products, get a better journey for pension planning, stuff that we can't do today in a very sensible manner. So data exchange is a key part of that. And if we move over to other stuff, which is like stifling and forcing competition, a great use case I've been talking to a lot of people about is mortgage lending. And this makes clear what the potential of FiDA is, right, or data exchange in general. So if you have a mortgage which kind of runs out after 10 years of fixed interest rates, today's world means you probably got to be addressed by your own mortgage lender, and they will give you an offer, right? Then you need to go out to some kind of a broker and share all of your data. You have to put in all of the information on your existing mortgage. In the future, this can be done by anybody else. If you share the data upfront, basically every single mortgage lender out there can give you a competitive offer with no reason at all. Another example is insurance. If you go for an insurance broker, Clark is a great example based here out of Frankfurt, right? In today's world, you basically need to enter a lot of information. You have to copy PDF, all of your former contracts, you have to send it to them. People from my team have gone through a journey just to test it. It takes weeks and weeks and weeks to get onboarded, right? In the future, it's just a mouse click if you are incentivized. But this incentivization is probably the big issue. How do we get this done? But looking at this kind of, I always call it bright future of data sharing, it will for sure make life of consumers and maybe also SMEs and corporates much easier, using also data beyond the ideas that we currently have in our mind. I think we have to be very creative on creating ideas around data sharing. One of the things we've been discussing with some of our clients is a big burden today for corporates is providing information around their CO2 footprint, for example, and everything around that. It's not part of the original scope of FiDA, right? Because that's not being demanded right now. But think of having a platform where you can securely exchange relevant data with others, right? Because it's all there. You just have to add another type of fields. And this is where the power really comes to bear, where data exchange between the institutions and the industries and the data users and finally then also the customers gets to a completely different level of value.
Norbert, it took a while to get to you, but I saw DZ Bank presenting here in Frankfurt at the Bankengipfel in September. A really, a kind of a very proactive view on FiDA and seeing it as an opportunity. Now, about 6 months later, where do you stand? And two-part question, also because you're a diverse group that has different activities that fall under the FiDA regulation. What do you see as the biggest challenges in implementing what's to come?
I think what Alex said, it's time to act. We decided to act like 1.5 years ago because we knew that FiDA will come in. We had questions like yesterday or the day before, but we're pretty sure it will be coming. And right now we have a very strong customer interface, especially the cooperative banks throughout Germany. And we have data and data and data. We have lots of data. And of course, we are more the data holder than right now a data user. But we're pretty sure that there is demand also for customers, especially retail, but also SME clients, that we're going to use the data. And we see ourselves as a group that can use the data and create value for the customers. And the other point you were mentioning, we are a very diverse group. We have companies only offering products, like in the background through the cooperative banks, but still also have companies with direct customer interaction. And right now we're talking about this, getting them together, thinking about which use cases do we have, do we want to go for a more progressive, going on a more progressive way using the data or being more protective. And for example, coming up with schemes, we're right now discussing what are we thinking about schemes? Do we want our own scheme? Do we want to try to follow somebody else creating a scheme? Do we want, as a DZ bank, also as a cooperative banking group, do we want to play a part in developing schemes? So right now, we are working on this, coming up with an idea for the Z-Bank and then discussing it also with the BVR to coming up with a whole idea for the cooperative banking sector.
And I think that the question of data standards and schemes is going to be crucial to actually get the governance and the operating model for FiDA right. And I assume that everyone knows that this is industry self-regulating, so it's up to the industry to create schemes and create that monetization and operating model. And obviously, that could be simple, or we could end up with lots of them. Alex, a lot of the conversations between insurances and banks, etc., go around wealth management, and obviously saying that we can potentially democratize wealth management and, you know, the financial companion, also with the use of AI. Your headquarters are in Switzerland, and Switzerland does not have yet a regulated financial data scheme or financial regulation, because the industry has actually come together and created something. There's something called the Open Wealth Initiative in Switzerland. Can you tell us a bit more about that and how and why the actors in the Swiss market have actually decided to do that without the regulatory pressure?
Sure, thanks. So what we've seen in Switzerland is that the leading banks and wealth managers and also the leading tech solution service providers in the market, like portfolio management system providers, we're looking to make it more efficient to connect to each other, and this was like an industry initiative which started a few years ago, with the goal to be able to connect B2B, peer-to-peer, in the market itself. Right? It didn't come from the ambition which we now see here in the EU with FiDA, to enable access now to everybody. I think they are also following and watching how it develops here. But at the same time as Additiv, of course, we're Swiss-based, so we're leveraging on the knowledge there. We've seen now the schemes being put into place for the let's say core wealth-related services. I think it serves as a good standard. But of course, we are also operating worldwide, and there we see different jurisdictions, different schemes evolving. I mean, this will be an interesting discussion to see here. Recently, we exchanged with our Singapore team, and there it's actually very interesting with the Singapore Financial Data Exchange. It has also been industry led to come up with a scheme with the leading banks and insurance providers there, and wealth managers connecting, then pushed it into a now government organized system, and especially having also like a consent management, which is very easy to use. And I think just to add also one thing to the discussion here, to increase the adoption rate of actually the clients, the customers using it. I mean, we've seen it in open banking, how much time it takes until really the population picks up. And I think there, what we've seen, what works very well is with a national identity wallet. And I think maybe something for discussion also later, how this can also connect and really push the adoption so that the consumers are really starting to use it. And there we see in Singapore, I've seen now every bank and every insurer, they're all offering financial planning, financial home services. It's accessible to everybody with a very easy customer journey.
It's very cool. And the digital identity, and we see a lot of regulation coming together to operate a digital society is coming in 2026. Verena, speaking of operating something, there is a new license under discussion in the realm of FiDA for what used to be called the AIS or PIS license for the open banking world. It's called FISP. What's that about? And also, how does that interact with the previous licenses? What do people have to think about and do with these two things playing together?
Yes, FIPS, so financial information service providers, are the ones who will handle the data that have been provided by the data holders and will make use of the data. And the regulator thought it would be a good idea to regulate them because they handle sensitive data. And it's quite similar to what we know from PSD2 and the open banking, the account information service. It's it's similar, and FiDA already says you can upgrade your PSD2 license to a FISP license if you want to, up to the national implementation. But I think it makes a lot of sense because the PSD2 license holders in this section already have an infrastructure going, so they can enhance it, or I think it makes a lot of sense to have this. But then, of course, you have, if you are fintech and you want to be the new kid on the block here, you can, of course, you now have to face regulation, and you have to do all the things a regulated entity needs to do, compliance, risk management, and so on. But yeah, I think it's still an opportunity, and from a customer perspective, I think it ensures trust in the data sharing scheme, and I think this is also crucial for the market.
Szabolcs, has there been, this is a question just out of the blue, has there been discussion around the interaction between the PSD2 license and the FISP license at EU level?
Yes, there have been discussions. I have to start with a disclaimer. I should have started with that I'm representing my personal opinion and not the opinion of the Council or the Member States or Hungary. You know how does it work? Yeah. During the negotiations on the file, there have been discussions on the interaction between the EISP and the FISP framework, and also there were some questions around why not integrating the two frameworks, because now we have an open banking framework under PSD2, which is under revision, and we are creating an open finance framework. If we look at the original Commission proposal, there are valid arguments on why creating a new framework, because there is a very important new element, which is compensation, which is not in the open banking framework. Here in the FiDA framework, the data holders are compensated for the necessary investment and the costs which arise during the implementation. But I think nothing prevents, once we have an operating framework on open finance and the revised open banking framework, then down in the future the two frameworks can be merged together, because if you look at, for example, the dashboards, I think it would be useful indeed, and it was also discussed to have one single dashboard for open banking and open finance, because it can be painful for the customers to manage two dashboards and deter them from giving consent.
Thanks. Chris, Norbert has said that they're looking very much as to how to deal with the scheme aspect of things. And there are other people in this room who I know are currently considering, how to interact and how to build these schemes. It's a crucial part of the FiDA regulation in terms of how to make it work. And there's a lot of conversation around, single national schemes or international schemes. What's your view on that? And what do you think is going to happen with regards to schemes, and what's important in creating them?
So first of all, in the schemes, I would say 80% of reality of the FiDA framework will actually be implemented, because it's about APIs, it's about the standards, it's about security, it's about governance. How do you create adherence to the scheme? So how to become a scheme member? How do you change the rules in the scheme? How do you change the products in the scheme? And there's also the different participants. It's the data holders, like Norbert and his background. You have the data users, who basically are part of this discussion. You have even consumer protection being part of this discussion. So I think it's clearly a very crucial round of people or participants that need to define how data exchange is going to be working, right? From a content point of view, from a governance point of view, IT security, everything. So it's the core of what finally the data exchange will be relying on. If you then think about the way the regulator or the Commission has given a lot of freedom, let's put it that way, to the industry how to define it, for me that's almost scary, right? Why? You can think about having the financial services individual groups like the Genossenschaftliche Finanzverbund, the cooperative banks, have their own scheme, right? So in Germany, we could end up probably with 5-6 different schemes only for banking. If you then extrapolate that to asset management and to insurance, right, we could add probably with 20-30 schemes in Germany. For me, that's not efficient. It's not doable, right? So what I think is required, and I would probably have been a good idea by the Commission to at least give some guidance on how they want to. I know they have a position, right? We talked to Eric Colombier, who is the head of retail at DG FISMA a couple of weeks ago, and he has a clear view that he just wants to have this plethora of schemes, and because, I mean, you could end up with hundreds in Europe. We don't want that. So the question is there any way of agreeing on a top-level scheme for the different sectors, like banking, asset management, insurance, which basically defines maybe 80% of what is required, and we know there has to be local differentiation because some of the products are not identical. So if you are in Germany, you have Europe, you have Riester, nobody outside of Germany knows these products, right? But they have to be part of the scheme. And it's probably the same in Spain, the same in Italy, the same in France. But at least like define the top 80% of what is required and agree among the banking community, among the insurance community, among the asset management community, how to deal with that. I think a great blueprint here is the EPC, so the European Payment Council, which was basically built in the early 2000s and has created such an environment where everybody could come together. There is clear governance around it, and using that as a blueprint to instigate this thinking process of will it make sense to have a European scheme for most of what we have to deal with, rather than have this plethora is probably the way to go. I mean, that's at least my personal view from, I would say, 50, 60, 70 discussions we've had on this topic in the last 18 months.
Thanks. Together with the schemes, we have the topic of data standards. I think, we have the Berlin group, we have the insurances that do the same. But what about the topic of sandboxing? I think coming from the fintech industry, we've been wanting regulatory sandbox for a long, long time. What's the view on creating, specific, also international use cases for FiDA and sandboxing them? Anyone?
I think it's a great idea, right? I mean, we've seen sandboxes work very well in the UK.
Yeah.
We've seen it work very well in Australia. So I think there is a great, I would say, help in turning or working together with data users, data holders, to understand what is relevant for the consumers in the end. So what are also the use cases that should be prioritized versus others which may not be as interesting in the first place. Trying to get in place the standardization, trying to get in place a common understanding of what is at the essence of data exchange. Why do we do it, and how could it be actually organized? And then at the same time, right, around the sandboxes and the products that we're testing there, kind of create the schemes to actually reflect that. I think that would be a great idea. So I have like sandboxes for both the products and the use cases, and the scheme angle would be super helpful.
Let's talk about the elephant in the room. I mean, we're talking about embedded finance. There was a side event to this yesterday, really going into embedded finance on an expert level. And obviously, open data allows for non-financial companies to start entering the financial services space. There's been a lot of debate of limiting the access to data of those so-called gatekeepers. To open data. Verena, can you shed some light on that, and what is the current view and status?
Yes, so I think there was one of the biggest changes in the last draft we've seen on FiDA, that is very explicitly in there, and it's obviously pointed at the US big tech companies. I'm not sure if this is really a legal subject. I think it's probably be dealt with and also needs to be solved on the political stage. Because, from a customer perspective, the US big tech has millions of customers in Europe as well, and the customers might actually be interested in I don't know, a wallet.
They even have licenses. They have
licenses. They have everything. Yes, exactly.
To serve under
and yeah, they are based in Ireland and so on. And I think from a legal perspective, it's really difficult to shut them out. I can see. I think everyone can see why we are talking about this. If we see FiDA as a customer facing opportunity or directive or regulation, then I think we should take this into account and maybe put some regulation on it. Like in DORA, they are now heavily supervised as well, and it will work. Maybe something like this could be a solution. But in the end, I think it will be a political agenda.
Thank you. Before we go into the topic of revenue generation or cost reduction, which, these two can potentially be a result of open finance, Szabolcs, when would you think the EU and the Commission would consider FiDA to be a success? What would they want to see? When do they think it actually works? Is it just when the data exchange works, or what's the ambition?
We have to ask the Commission about that when they are satisfied with the outcome. Sorry, I can elaborate on my personal thoughts that I think it has to be a positive sum game, or it has to be seen as a positive sum game, which is a win for everybody. Because now I fear that it is seen as a zero sum game when there are losers on open finance and winners on open finance. It should be the case that everybody should win on this, because this is why we are doing this. And all of the participants, all of the incumbent financial institutions has to engage in setting up the schemes, as we were talking about, because it's a market-oriented and market-based initiative. The FiDA regulation only sets and creates the framework, but at the end, the market will decide how to manage this framework and how to set the rules of this framework. So if we have a well-functioning framework, if the schemes are set, if we see the use cases emerge, and we have seen the incentive, or we see the incentive for the customers as well to engage in open finance, then I think it can be seen as a success, and it can be also seen as a first step towards a data sharing ecosystem where other sectors can be involved and included in data sharing step by step.
Great. So, open banking has been often criticized for not working, despite it working technically, because not enough traffic was created on the pipes on the one hand, but also no one actually doing anything with the data, not creating amazing use cases for the customers, or the customer experience being not ideal. I'm smiling at Gideon here. When you look at this for DZ Bank, or you look at it with different clients, the three of you, what's the view on making sure that those use cases are of interest, create volume of API calls? Because with those, as far as I think I understand, the data holders can recoup some of their cost. What initiatives are you seeing? What are you looking at, where most stakeholders have a tangible value add?
I think the question is, what is value add? Is value add only customer facing? Because right now, if we're talking about FiDA, the first point is always coming up, okay, we can do some cross and upselling. Yes, you can, but of course you have to create the customer some added value. In Germany, it's quite hard. Normally you say the customer isn't interested in sharing any data, except you are getting a Check24 jersey. Then you sell everything. Or €5 Amazon account. It still works, but Check24 had the idea to create a customer value. If it's really customer value, I don't know. But this is perceived, yeah. So you were talking about the financial home. I think for the cooperative banks, of course, the question is, we're right now, let's call it an offline financial home, because many customers still have every financial stuff with their cooperative bank. Can we transform it into a digital world? That's one question. And of course, for the cooperative banks, and of course for the Z Bank Group as a solution provider, we have the questions, can we see any additional cost savings or efficiency points? And maybe can we create added value for the customer? For example, if it's easier to come up with better how to say it. If the processes are leaner, of course, they are not that costly. Of course, it can be cheaper for the customer on the one hand, or on the other hand, you can give 50% of the discount to the customer and keep your 50% discount in the end to create added value, not only for the customer, but also for the banks.
Great. Alex.
Yes, to add on this one, so also thinking about financial home use cases. In the background, you can actually automate a lot, have an automated health check proposition, for example, right? To automatically check any deviations, which can detect changes to your personal life situation, and then check and adapt the services which you currently have versus what might make sense. And then in the background, you will have a lot of API calls, of course. I mean, maybe we should try to get rid of this 90-day security checks for each account. So if we could keep this, for example, on a yearly basis, then in the background, we can have a lot of automation and new added value services.
And you can help through this the customer or the salesperson to create a better experience for the customer. So in the end, it's also the customer decides what he wants, and also the automation can help to create a better customer experience.
I think just adding to this, I think the transparency of the data and on the state of the customer, something that is not valuable only for competitors, but probably even relevant for incumbents. So if you take a look out there today, if you're a client of one of the large international or even national financial services groups, you will probably have 10 different customer records, right? You have to maintain them, you have to change them, you have to be stay abreast of when you move. It's just a nightmare, right? So the data exchange could, for example, help with that by coupling it somehow to a like generic ID, and we see a lot of ID discussions now with the UID wallet coming up. This could create massive value for the client without even touching any of the propositions that we have here, right? And that is basically a little bit of regaining the customer or re-winning the customer in the digital space rather than just throwing additional offers at him, which is also something that will happen, right? And the better the idea, the better the product, the better for the client. That's, of course, always the case. But let's look at it not only from that angle of we can earn money or it has a big cost effort for us, but what is the real value of having a platform where you can standardizedly exchange information, right, between banks, right? I mean, one of the things that was interesting by yesterday's shock was we kind of started discussing in the team what would happen if FiDA were not to come, right? How would data exchange be orchestrated in a world where you would have to do individual bilateral discussions, contracts, compensation agreements with hundreds of financial service institutions only in Germany? It's never doable. There's no way to do it, right? So we're glad it came back this morning, right? So, but if you take that as a direction into how can open data economy work in the future, what is the real value? And it will only unfold not on day one, not on day two, but the more we think about it, the more use cases will come, the more connected we are, the better we are able to give value to the customer. I think a great example is Brazil. So we talked to our Brazilian colleagues a couple of months ago and looked at the local ecosystem, which was started in 2021. You have 230 million inhabitants in Brazil. There's 30 million users of the infrastructure, which is significant. There's 40 million consents, data sharing consents have been granted over the last years. And now, sit down, I couldn't believe that number, right? There's a weekly number of API calls, and the number is 2 billion, each week, right? I'm not saying you can earn a lot of money with it because the individual pricing is probably still low, but you see that the value of sharing data is obvious. And what happened, and you can see that in the figures, and that is creating value out on both sides for mine. It's a great example for that. Interest rates for consumer lending actually went down, right? Because the transparency is bigger between the different competitive offerings, but what also went up, and that's then a great value add for the consumer and for the bank, acceptance rates went up significantly. So because the banks were much better able to understand what is the total value situation, the total amount of money that this person earns, you could actually grant better credit. And I think this is like the secondary effects which nobody thinks about. We're all talking about, we're going to steal the client from our competitor and we're going to get stolen some of our clients. But how do you serve your client better in an environment where you have to recover the relationship to your client in the digital world? And we talk about nothing more or less is about regaining and re-winning your client in the digital world.
We're going to wrap it up here and pass it to questions to the audience. But just as a last add-on to this, a lot of banks, and there's a parallel panel on AI. A lot of banks have announced significant investment in agentic AI. I think FiDA has to be the data infrastructure for financial services-based generative customer service. That is, the way people who are much younger than I am want to interact with their financial services providers or anyone. And so that's, I think, it for now. And we would love to hear if there are questions from the audience. But first, I wanted to thank my great panelists for sharing their insights and experience.
Thanks a lot, Chris. There's a point you raised about the use cases, and I mean, there's no question about the consumer benefit that FiDA offers, and there's no question about the data benefit either. What misses from my perspective is the monetization, because without monetization, no one's going to do it. I mean, or it's going to be done in a very, I want to say, in a very inferior, or let's call it a standardized fashion. And I mean, and we've seen that example with open banking, for instance. The monetization incentive is, I want to say, for certain stakeholders is missing. So maybe if you could just talk a little bit about that.
When I paid a visit to Eric Grigorean, his team kind of designed and wrote the regulation a year ago, he said there was two faults we did, or failures we did with PSD2. One is we didn't enable contractual relationships between the participants of a scheme, although we created, in fact, schemes. And second, we didn't allow for compensation. So now in PSD3, as you might know, compensation is possible, right? And it's a core part of how the ecosystem will be created going forward. Still, there is limitations even now in the regulation as to what is the amount. And it will be part of the discussion in the financial data sharing schemes. That's why we always say you can't start with these discussions early enough, because it will determine the amount of money being spent there and the amount of money being earned there, to have these discussions very early on. So from my point of view, it is an essential part, also has to be considered, but it will not pay the bill for all of it. It will contribute to the operating cost, probably. And depending on how successful your use case is, as a data user, right, you can also provide good use cases to your clients, or as a data holder, maybe you provide value-added services, different values, even beyond the original scope of what FiDA is looking for. I mean, just like an example, Norbert, if they ever come that far, right, they're willing to provide a customer file with all the information ready-made to somebody else, but at a cost of 150 euros. It could be one of the outcomes, right? I'm not saying we're getting there. I'm just saying there is enough negotiation power and negotiation space in the schemes to define whatever the industry is really going for.
Thanks.
$150 would be not that good, because we're not only data holder, we also want to use the data. So it would on the one hand be, of course, good as a data holder, but as a data user would become very costly.
Okay. You have to buy lower cost data and enrich it.
But honestly, that's a good question, and that's also part of the discussion. What do we want? Do we want to go into the discussion as more from a data holder perspective, coming like with your 150 euros, or as with data users, want to come up with like 150 cents maximum? So that's also part of the discussion, and I think that's also, if you think about the DZ Bank group, you have clear solution providers. There are more data holders than, like, for example, insurance company having the customer interface. They would be more on the, let's get the data pretty cheap, and the other would be more on the side, let's get enough money for the data.
Okay. Any other questions? No? All right. Well, then I think we're on time to pass it on to the next panel discussion. Thank you very much for showing up. Thank you for your interest, and I hope that a lot of you will engage in open data exchanges and create amazing customer experiences.
And thank you for hosting the panel.
Thanks.